Hi, everyone. My name is Vanya, and I work at LeadX, where we are on a mission to spark the next 100 million leaders around the world. We're doing that with an AI-powered mobile habit building app that helps you to build leadership habits. We do that through behavioral nudges. We have a content platform, and we have a ton of ways to integrate it with your current assessments like DISC, Myers-Briggs. We can integrate with situational leadership, as well as customize it to your own competency model. So let's start with a quick chat box check-in. If you're here, open up the chat window and just type in where you're from. I'd like to see who we have, where you're all calling in from. Okay, Milwaukee, Nebraska, more Nebraska, Iowa, Connecticut. Oh, wow, now it's really coming in. Vancouver, PA, Orange County, California, Boston, New York City, DC, Alabama. Looks like we've got a good crowd here today. New Jersey. I am from New Jersey too. Wow, India. Okay, so let's get started. I hope you will give yourself the gift of uninterrupted focused learning today. Please welcome our special guest, Sarah Devereaux.
Well, hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you today. I am calling in from beautiful Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I'm originally from here, but based in Boulder, Colorado these days. Here spending some extended quarantine time with our family. So I am a senior strategy manager within Google's Central People Operations Group these days. Which basically means that I jump around working on a bunch of different projects related to helping make work even better for Googlers around the world. But today, I'm here to talk about a really special program that we have at Google called g2g, stands for Googlers to Googlers. It's an internal volunteer teaching network where participants dedicate a portion of their time outside of their core roles to helping develop their peers. So this could be through teaching courses, it could be through providing one-on-one coaching, or even designing their own learning materials. It all just depends on what folks are passionate about and what problem they really see out there from a learning perspective that they want to solve. So in terms of the folks that are teaching courses, they honestly teach just about everything. That's a question I get asked quite a bit. So we've got sales skills, we've got coding, machine learning, presentation skills, and fire breathing, medieval jousting, introduction to 3D printing was one of my favorite ones to help create and also take. And really at Google, we believe that everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to teach. We hire some of the most wonderful, I say humbly, but some of the most wonderful and brilliant people in the world. And we really value the contribution that every Googler brings to helping our people grow and develop. So so my contribution to g2g, I served as the global lead for g2g for just over 5 years before I moved on to start leading up executive development programs at Google. That was another one of my past gigs. And the program is really near and dear to my heart. It was one of those things that when I think about my career, it was quite a crown jewel, so to speak. Okay, so I'm really excited to share more about it with you. Let's see. Okay, great. So whenever I talk about g2g, the thing that people seem most struck by is our scale. So over the past 8 years, we have scaled the program dramatically. So back in 2011, late 2011 was when I kind of started on the program. And we had around 400 active participants in a handful of offices. They were mostly teaching sales skills. It really wasn't growing very much. And then in 2020, as you can see here on the slide, we have a little over 11,000 Googlers that participate across over 100 offices. This accounts for over 80%, so that's 68,000 hours in 2020. That's 80% of all formal learning that's happening at Google this year. Now, in 2019, we had around 68,000 hours as well. I'm sorry, this actually should say 2019. So in 2019, we had around 68,000 hours. In 2020, We've had a little bit less due to COVID, but still around 53,000 hours in 2020. So that consistency across years, we had 65,000, I believe, in 2018, around 64 in 2017. So that consistency is also something that we're really proud of, and that's pretty remarkable. Now, when COVID hit, and our G2Gers, were kind of all set up for their 2020 courses. Another thing that we were really proud of is that since virtual learning, and you'll see why as I continue to talk about the program, has been a real cornerstone of G2G for so long, we were able to pivot really quickly when COVID happened, and really very minimal disruption before we were able to take a ton of those in-person courses that G2Gers were set up to facilitate throughout the year, and then pivot those to be online. So yeah, that's something that it was great to see that community come together, and in just a matter of weeks, be able to reestablish, what learning looks like at Google during, a pretty unprecedented event. Now, another thing that I'm pretty proud of is that 95% number that you see there. So 95% favorability. And really what that says is that we were able to achieve this level of scale without sacrificing quality. So if you do something, right, if you make it really big and it sucks, you're not really achieving a whole lot. So the fact that we were able to scale this up to 11,000 folks across over 100 offices globally, and we were able to keep an average favorability and actually increase that average favorability over time to 95%, that was a pretty big feather in our hat. And as I just said, the number went up over time. So as we continued to get bigger, we also continued to get better. And our G2Gers are actually on par in terms of quality and the favorability that their participants rate them with our internal facilitators, so folks who do this day in and day out as their everyday job, as well as our external vendors. So we bring in the professionals, right? We bring in the great folks from outside of Google. We've got some amazing vendor partners at Google, and our G2Gers pretty consistently outperform our external facilitators as well, which is kind of amazing to us. So everything that I've just shared, right? Just a little intro here, but it sounds pretty good. It sounds like it's all going great. But a lot of the time, what people will ask is, okay, so how did you do this? How do you motivate? This is about 10% of our workforce. And again, very consistently, we've had around 10% of Google's workforce participating in G2G over about the past 10 years. How do you motivate 11,000 people to volunteer their time for free, to teach their peers? And truly, it is for free. We literally give them almost nothing. We do give them a tiny little Android figurine that says G2G on it. It has a little G2G t-shirt. We give them that after they have facilitated, I believe it's 20 hours in a year, and it costs $6. So we give people $6 for facilitating 20 hours, which including prep is probably around 40, 35, 40 hours worth of work. So it's really very little that we provide in order to get folks to do this, kind of from that external validation and extrinsic reward sort of standpoint. But in terms of how we do it, it's actually really simple. You just have to do 4 things. And the trick, and I'm going to tell you about them, but the trick is honestly just learning to get out of your own way and tame that anxiety that comes from releasing control and trusting 11,000 people, many of which you've probably never met, to do the right thing when it comes to learning at Google. So let's talk a little bit about those 4 things and how they all work. So the first one is to trust people to do great work. They are capable of more than you think. So again, that releasing of control, right? So if you're able to really trust folks, to do a great job, then you're able to get out of their way, you're able to get out of your own way, and you're able to create benefits for the organization that are far beyond what you probably ever would have thought of. When you've got 11,000 brains and 11,000 people who are super, super excited and passionate about what they're doing, if you trust them to just go off and do it, just with some, general guidance, general support, then the results are, we've found, consistently higher than we ever would have expected. Second piece is to give them the tools to do the work well. So no one wants to do a bad job. Like nobody says, okay, you know what? I'm going to volunteer my time, to do this thing. They're not going to pay me. Sometimes I might be able to get my manager to approve for me to do it as part of my core job, but sometimes I may not be able to do that. And I'm going to have to do it on top of my regular workload. And I want to do all of this, and I want to really, really suck at it. I want to be awful. Nobody says that. Like, that's not how humanity works. We don't put our time and our energy and our passion and our love for something, into a task or a project and say, God, I just want to be the worst at this particular thing. If you give people the tools to do the work well, they will take advantage of them. Third, you want to help people understand how what they're doing connects to the bigger picture. So what's that big vision? What is Google trying to achieve as a company? What are we trying to achieve across learning and development at Google? Why do we think that what you're doing connects to that larger purpose? And how can we show you data? And how can we show you your individual contribution and connect all the dots to that larger vision and that larger purpose? So that's really the job. We'll talk about this a bit later as well. That's really the job of L&D, is to make sure that you are connecting what people are doing to that bigger purpose, that bigger vision, that big, beautiful, bright future that you're all trying to work together towards, to keep them focused in the right direction. And then finally, just in case I haven't said it enough, step back, get out of the way, and really let the magic happen. Watch the magic. That is definitely the hardest part, and it is the most important. So if you do these four things, like I said, people will consistently step up. They will consistently exceed your expectations every single time. In 10 years of working with this program, I have yet to see our G2Gers truly disappoint us. Okay, so I just painted a pretty rosy picture of what G2G looks at Google. It all sounds really great and beautiful. Wow, it's all just working. But in all honesty, it wasn't always so rosy. We made so many mistakes along the way as we were getting this program up and running. And it really wasn't until we shifted our perspective and we approached the program a little bit differently that we were able to achieve the success that I just described. It wasn't about creating more tools. It wasn't about, yes, the data infrastructure is important, like all of these, tactical things are important, but it was perspective, it was mindset that really did the trick. So with that in mind, I want to go back to the beginning for a few minutes. I want to go back in time to when G2G started and to help us understand the process of how we got to where we are today. So G2G started in 2007 in Dublin, and it was really born out of necessity. We had a ton of new hires coming in the door in our EMEA headquarters, which at the time was Dublin, for our AdWords product, and we had 3 trainers. And we had to get these hundreds of new hires trained up over the course of one summer. We had 3 months to get them ready to go by September. And so we were like, okay, there's no way we can do this with 3 trainers. What are we going to do? So we went to our sales leadership. These were AdWords sales folks at the time and support. And we went to the sales leadership in Dublin and we said, hey, so we got a problem. We can either shift start dates, which is, super popular with everybody, leadership and recruiting, or we can take your best people off the floor. So they're not going to sell anything. We're not going to have them making you any money during this time. Also super popular. And we can have those folks help us to train these people up so that you've got job ready, high quality folks selling by September. So what do you think? And it wasn't really as simple as, hey, oh, yep, they agreed, it was great. But after quite a bit of, discussion, deliberation, and some very, I would say, well-placed data in terms of, hey, it's actually more profitable. It is better financially for us to take these people off the floor and have them teach than it is to push start dates and to lose talent. So once we kind of showed them and illustrated that argument, we were able to secure these folks as temporary trainers, and so we taught them how to teach. We got them all ready to go, and we got them familiar with the content, and we turned them loose, and they did amazing. They did great. It was incredible how well their quality scores were, again, compared to our regular trainers. They were having fun. The trainees were giving us great feedback. It all seemed like it was going really well. And after that crazy summer was over, we thanked everybody and we're like, okay, back to your day jobs you go. And we had one little hiccup. They didn't want to stop teaching. And that's when we really knew, wow, man, we've got something here. You got to go back. You got to go back and sell. And most people wanted to. They wanted to do their day job, absolutely. That's what they were hired for. They were excited about it, but they didn't want to stop the teaching. So we started thinking about how we might be able to spread this to other offices. And in 2008, it started catching on in the US. We had teams that we were scaling up in Boston, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where I'm from. We had teams in Chicago, and then eventually in the Bay Area. And the Bay Area was actually much slower to catch on than everybody else was. And there's a reason for that I always like to highlight. They had more full-time trainers. They had more vendors available to them. And so they didn't need this kind of scrappy, innovative option in order to keep trainings running without trainers. So we always say at Google that creativity needs constraints. That's part of our innovation model at Google. And the Bay Area just didn't have many constraints. Now they caught on eventually. We have thousands of G2Gers that teach in the Bay Area, but it wasn't as urgent, and thus the innovation was slower. So I just like to point that out. Okay, so 2011, we had 400 G2Gers globally. And most of them, as I said earlier, were still teaching sales skills, and the quality was actually pretty low at that point. Things were kind of not turning out as well. We weren't scaling things up as fast as we would have thought that we could have. We were seeing lower quality scores, and we were seeing them continuing to go down. And so in mid 2011, the L&D department started looking at G2G and saying, what happened? Like, this went great. This wasn't that long ago, 4 years. And G2G was doing great when it first started in Dublin. Has it just gotten too big? That was only 30 people. This is 400. Maybe it's too big. It had all worked so well. Like, what did we do wrong, and how can we fix it? Now, as you know, we scaled up to the 11,000 that I talked about in 2020. But in 2017, we were already at 7,000. So if you look at that timeline, right, like around 4.5 years to go from 0 to 400, and then about 5 years to go from 400 to 7,000. So that's a pretty big jump in terms of scale. So what did we do? How did we fix our problem? So the very simple answer is that we had a trust problem that we needed to address. So during that first, crazy summer in Dublin, we didn't have time to not trust people. We had to get them trained up fast, and we couldn't be too picky about how it happened or who was coming into the program. If you raised your hand and you were like, yep, I'll do it, I volunteer, we're like, great, we'd love to have you come in, like, let's get you trained and let's get you on the floor in front of the classroom, getting folks ready to do their jobs. And again, remember, they did a great job, right? Like, they did really, really well, better than when we had the program, kind of up and running in a more formal way. Quality scores had been high, participants were happy. The program also had a great reputation. You wanted to be in G2G in 2007. Now, once G2G became an official program, that was when we had the time to screw everything up. We didn't do it on purpose. We thought we were doing all the right things, but we instituted layers of requirement. There was a specific level that you had to be. You had to be in a particular organization. You had to be at Google for a minimum of 2 years. Then you had to go through a rigorous interview process. You had to shadow the course that you were interested in teaching twice. You had to co-facilitate the course that you were interested in teaching twice. You had to complete a facilitation skills workshop, very extensive workshop that was only available in Mountain View, by the way, and not available virtually. And then all of these things were mandatory. And we were super strict about making sure that everyone followed the process if they wanted to be part of G2G. And then we learned something. We found out that the best way to ensure that a Googler doesn't do something is to make it mandatory. We put up obstacle after obstacle and created a system that showed potential participants that we didn't trust them to do a good job. The program stalled, but Googlers were teaching anyway. They were just going around the Central Learning and Development Department in order to do it. They were creating their own content instead of teaching official L&D content, and they were scheduling their sessions outside of our central learning and management system so that they wouldn't get caught. I want to pause on that point for a minute. Think about that. While we were trying to scale up this peer-to-peer program, we'd created an environment where people were worried about learning and development catching them while they were trying to help their peers grow and develop. It's just a punch in the gut. We'd created this system, right? Like this system that looked so good on paper, but it was based on rules and requirements, on quality checks and mistrust. And that was, honestly inherent. In addition to just not working from a human motivation standpoint, it also was inherently contrary to this open and inclusive culture that we had really worked hard to build at Google overall. But Googlers, you can't stop them. As I said, they kept teaching anyway. They kept helping because they saw a need and an opportunity where they could make a difference. And as we watched kind of from the sidelines as L&D, it was obvious that we needed to make a change if we ever wanted to have any sort of influence, again, not control, over this program. So in 2012, we did a little soul searching. We examined what we believed about learning, what we believed about Google, what we believed about ourselves as a learning and development department and our role in learning at Google. And by 2014, we had a core set of beliefs to guide us. And yes, it did take 2 years to write these 3 bullet points and to test them and to figure out what really was going to resonate not only with our G2Gers, but with Googlers overall. How could we help people to simply understand what we believed about learning at Google and what we believed about G2G and G2G's contribution to learning at Google? So every Googler has a right to learn, no matter who you are, no matter where you're located, what your role is, how long you've been here, or how big your paycheck is. We believe that you have a right to learn at Google. It is not just a privilege. Number 2, Googlers are smart, capable, and motivated. They have the capacity. Give them the power. They can do it to grow Google's learning culture and to take the reins and really drive things forward. Again, no one volunteers for something and wants to be bad at it. And then finally, learning and development should guide and empower, not own and control. We are behind the scenes. We don't need the spotlight. We don't need to be center stage. This is all about you. One of the things that we did actually once we came out with these beliefs is we took the G2G logo, which you saw on that first slide when the presentation started, and we removed people operations, we removed people development, we took away everything so that it just said G2G, because That's really important. It's important for the people who are participating to know and to understand that the program belongs to them. They are the ones who own it, and they are also the ones who are accountable and responsible for its success. That's a really big point. Now, I don't want you to, yes, it took us 2 years, as I said, but I don't want you to think that we only wrote 3 bullet points in 2 years. We were doing a lot of other stuff. We were really busy building. So we were building community, we were building credibility, and we were building the infrastructure to support what we like to call an infinitely scalable solution. That's another one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to G2G. This thing can grow at an amazing, just an astounding speed. If you were to tell the G2G team, hey, you need to add 2,000 people to the program tomorrow, or you need to add 5,000 people to the program tomorrow, they could do it with very little disruption, with very little additional cost to Google, because the way that we have set up our systems and infrastructure is such that it is, again, as I said, infinitely scalable. We can just keep going and going and going. So a few notable things that I want to run through with y'all that we built in order to reach that kind of infinite scalability. So we crafted our data architecture. So we instituted some standard tracking and process to ensure that we knew who was teaching what, when, to who, where it was happening, and how well they were doing it. If you don't know who's doing what and who they're interacting with and how well they're doing it, you really can't optimize the system in order to continually improve those metrics. So remember earlier I said that percent favorability, right, like 95%, our quality got better as we got bigger, and having that really intentional data infrastructure set up was incredibly important for being able to achieve that. We also launched the Office Leads program. So this is a network of around 130 Googlers who provide on-the-ground support to our G2Gers in each of the 100 offices where G2G happens. The G2G Central team can't be everywhere. We can't talk to everyone. We can't do everything. You know, we have to make sure that there are folks on the ground in those offices, in those locations, who can be a face of the program. So essentially, those 130 Googlers, and it actually might be a bit more these days, they are the face of G2G to their local G2Gers, and they're critical. And I'll talk about this a bit later as well. They're critical to our G2Gers taking more ownership over what gets taught in their locations, because they understand what the needs of a particular office is far better, you know, than the central team ever could. So if you've got a G2G champion sitting in Buenos Aires, or you've got a G2G champion, you know, sitting in our Finland office, you know, in Helsinki, you are going to they are going to have a far better idea of the learning needs of that location than somebody who's sitting in Mountain View, California. Now, we also made all of those mandatory steps in the process optional, and that was super scary at first. It's never easy, again, to release control, but we did it, and we watched participation skyrocket. So full participation in the process, and the full process, tripled in the first year that we made it optional. Satisfaction ratings from folks who completed G2G onboarding went up, and saying and really positioning what we were trying to do as guidelines and support instead of rules and requirements, it drastically changed the tone of the conversation. Language matters, right? And we're positioning as, hey, like, this is just some support we'd like to offer you all. Here's why we think it's important. Please take advantage of it if you feel you need to. That's very different than, this is exactly what you need to do, and if you don't, then you're out. There's a difference between recommending things to people and mandating things and then checking up on them. Creates a very different vibe. Let's see here. We also built an automated recognition system to provide welcome emails, words of encouragement, you know, certificates of accomplishment. Again, very much part of this infinite scalability. And we really focused on, okay, where do we need that you know, high touch experience with folks, and where can we automate it where if they hear it from an email, auto bot, or they hear it, or a real person presses send but sends the same words, does it really matter? And we found through a ton of A/B testing, through lots of experimentation, that in a lot of cases it just didn't. And then finally, we expanded our skill development offerings, providing multiple courses on things like facilitation, instructional design, coaching, and consulting to help our G2Gers truly become experts on the learning and development topics that they were passionate about. Now, in recent years, so kind of in the 2016, 17 and beyond timeframe, we went even further. So we automated our quality assurance process. Again, lots of helpful hints like, hey, seems like your score on this particular course is not so hot. Like let's talk about it. Like let's get you a little bit of facilitation coaching. Let's see how we can bring that up, right? How we can improve. Open access to our content, so everybody can teach just about everything at Google. We have self-paced train the trainers and all kinds of good stuff. And then empowering local communities, as I shared before, through those office leads to take even more ownership over the learning strategy for their individual locations. So again, these things were all pretty critical for getting the program to where it is today. But it was really that shift in perspective, that shift in mindset back in 2012 that made it all possible. The realization that L&D doesn't have to do it all, and employees can really be trusted to do great work if we give them good tools, a clear vision, and most importantly, freedom. Really, really matters. Now, I started off talking about the numbers, but I want to end talking about the heart of G2G. It's not only about the numbers, and we hear so many just truly heartwarming pieces of feedback from participants about what the program really means to them. Our G2Gers tell us that the program has deepened their commitment to Google by giving them a new way to champion Google's culture. It's allowed them to develop transferable skills like facilitation, group management that have helped them in their core jobs. It's helped them to network, to come into contact. It's a 110 plus thousand person company. It's not, when I joined, Google was like 7,000 people. It's very different, right? And G2G has helped people to connect with new folks across the company that they likely wouldn't have ever interacted with without the program. And several G2Gers have also told us that it gives them a creative outlet, something that really energizes them to help them consistently perform at their best. In 2015, we also conducted a formal research study to analyze the impact of the program on participants. And we did this with our Google Analytics team. These are the folks that have brought things like G teams, which really talked about psychological safety and how to create the most effective teams. You may have seen that research externally. These are the folks who design and also do the analysis for our annual employee engagement survey, Google guys. So we weren't messing around. We got like the analysts, like of all analysts at Google, to come and do this study for us. To really impact, or to really analyze the impact of the program on our G2Gers, on our participants. And the study revealed that when compared to non-G2Gers, G2Gers feel like they have more decision power at work, which we know is a motivator, less distraction, and a higher sense of belonging. Again, very clear motivator for employee engagement, this feeling that they are connected to something bigger, which is one of the reasons that we really double down on making sure that that connection to clear vision, that connection to a higher purpose was really clear for our participants. And the benefits really don't stop with the participants themselves. So learners who have been taught by G2Gers consistently report how beneficial it is to hear from someone who's on the front lines, who understands what it's like, right, to be in their shoes. And this is why we often see favorability of G2Gers surpass that of external vendors, because it's not only about facilitation skill and subject matter area expertise. It's also about, do you understand what it's like to be me and how hard some of this can be? And because G2Gers have that ability to step into their shoes, and we really focus a lot on like empathy during facilitation as well as a skill for our G2Gers, they are able to connect with participants in a way that just outside people can't. Now, over the years, G2Gers, as I said, have consistently exceeded our expectations. Learning at Google, I really want to make sure that this is clear. Learning at Google just simply doesn't happen without this community. And although I'm probably a little bit biased, I think that G2G is one of the purest expressions of Google culture that we have. These folks are selflessly volunteering their time to help their peers develop, both professionally and in many cases personally, with courses like mindfulness, burnout, empathy. And after more than 14 years as a Googler, I honestly can't think of anything that I would say is more googly. So thank you all so much. I hope that was interesting and you learned a thing or two. I would be delighted to take questions, Vanya, if we want to open it up. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thanks so much, Sarah. We've got quite a few questions here already. And if anybody wants to ask Sarah something, you can submit it with the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen or just type it into the chat.
And before we take the first one, I should probably preface, there's a lot going on at Google right now, always. And I am certainly not the expert on everything. So I am more than happy to answer questions about G2G, about leadership development at Google, which I spent a lot of time doing, about learning and development at Google, about talent. But I will have to decline to answer questions that I am not qualified to answer. So I just want to throw that out there before we get started.
Yeah, of course. So the first question here is from Peter. Is the 68,000 hours the number of hours delivered by the G2Gers, or is it the hours attended?
It is the hours delivered by the G2Gers. Yes. So an 8-hour, the way that we count it, an 8-hour course, for instance, let's, I don't know, 4 hours over the course of a couple of days, would be 8 hours for the G2Ger, and it would be 8 times the number of participants in terms of total training hours for Google.
Wow. You reference your G2Gers as volunteers. Are they doing this as part of their work? Like, are they being paid their normal salary while they do this, or are they just doing this in volunteer time?
Yeah, it really, really depends. So I tend to call them volunteers because we really discourage nominations. So when you nominate somebody for something, there's not that G2G really depends on intrinsic motivation to work. You have to want it. And so if you're being nominated by your manager or your manager's manager, or maybe your HRBP, you may not want it. You may have the skills, you may be a great fit in terms of skills and experience, but not in terms of passion. And so I always call them volunteers because we want them to want it and we want them to come to us. Now, in terms of compensation, it really depends. So some managers are very supportive. Obviously, Google is, the birthplace of 20% time. So we have lots of managers who are great and who have the business flexibility to be able to allow their folks to participate 10, 15, 20% of their time of their regular hours doing G2G. We have other folks that, manager may not be supportive or the business, case just they may not be able to support it from a business standpoint. Listen, I'm really sorry. I would love you to be able to do this. And I just can't. Like from a business standpoint, I need 100% of your time right now. And some people say, okay, well, I guess I'll, try again in a couple of quarters when business, slows down. Or they may say, great, I'm just going to do it on top of it then. I'm just going to do this in my free time. So it's really a very case by case basis.
Great. Peter's asking, how is the admin supported?
Okay, Peter, I'm gonna guess what you mean. Let me know if I get it wrong. So in terms of how we run the program, we have around I think the team's about 7 these days, 6 or 7 folks who are fully dedicated to G2G. And as I said, a lot of our administrative tasks that really don't gain additional value by having a human being doing them manually. We invested a ton of time and volunteer G2G engineering hours in kind of the 2012 to about 2014 time span in automating and building data infrastructure that allowed us to automate a lot of the administrative tasks that we were doing on a repetitive basis.
This question's coming from Danielle. How did you get participants to register for programs? How were they motivated? Did you use badges or certifications?
Yeah, nope. So we've got a badge. If you join G2G, meaning if you click, the little submit button on your "Hey, I want to help" form, then you automatically get a G2G badge. So we really do just welcome everybody, and I think that's there's a couple different things, right? So I think that welcoming, inclusive environment is a big part of it. Like, we want you. Like, we're excited that you want to come help us, and we're super excited that you're here, and we want you to be here. And so everybody who teaches anything, even those folks who are teaching fire breathing, they get their badge the exact same as the people who are teaching manager development and leadership development courses, right? Their badge is the same, because we believe that everybody has something to learn and everybody's got something to teach, and we value every person who is willing to share their knowledge with other people. So I think that welcoming, kind of inclusive environment of belonging is a big part of it. Like, welcome to the family, come on in, like, sit down for a cup of coffee. But then we also, the three components of trust people to do great work, give them the tools. So don't hover over them, just let them do their thing, give them some autonomy and some freedom, give them great tools. So focus on building things that are going to help them to be great and making sure that they know about them, and then connecting them up to this larger purpose. Like, yeah, learning doesn't happen at Google without you. You are literally that important. That's really all we've needed.
Thank you. So the next question's from Joel, and I'm sure a lot of people are curious. Do you use an LMS in-house or a vendor to track all the trainers, classes, and participant completions?
We do indeed. We have a learning management system, and it was internally built. So yeah, it is not available outside of Google.
Do you think that this could work at a company that doesn't have the same intrinsic value of learning built into the corporate culture like Google does?
Fascinating. Oh, it's a great question. I have two answers. So one is no, not long term, and two is yes, change the culture. So G2G, I think if you can get it going, right? And I did a podcast. Oh God, when was it? March, I think. I did the Brave New Work podcast. If you want to take a peek at that, on unauthorized change. And G2G, it was not like a slam dunk in terms of leadership, sponsorship, and support for G2G. There was a lot that we had to do, honestly, that was a little under the radar, until we were able to prove that, yep, you know what, this works. I know it sounds nuts, but it really does work. Let me show you a year's worth of data in small offices where there really wasn't any training before about how this works. So I would say that if the culture never becomes one that values learning, then no, I don't think that it's probably a great program for a culture like that. But if you did it for a couple of years, could it potentially help to shift the culture towards one that values learning for the sake of learning and growth? I think it really could. We have seen that kind of mindset become more a part of the everyday life of Googlers. I think even more since G2G has become kind of a household name.
Great. I have a question from Anonymous. Do you have any resources that you would recommend to people looking to build out something like this?
I do. So there's a site out there called Rework that Google put out, and I wrote an entire section on G2G. So there is a very helpful. Well, you tell me if it's helpful. I wrote it, so I'm I'm a little biased, but I think it's helpful. Kind of how-to guide about how to set up G2G. It's also got some templates that are super easy. You can do them in docs. You can do them in spreadsheets. It's not very complicated. That can really get you started with the scaling side of things. And then there's actually 3 books that I highly recommend people read if they are going towards a model like this. And the first one is Drive by Daniel Pink. And I know that everybody, like so many people have read Drive, right? Yes, Sarah, we've all read Drive. Great. Nobody's actually doing it. So read it again. and actually think about how you implement what he's talking about. And then 2 is Thinking in Systems by Danella Meadows. And that one's a little bit more esoteric, I guess, in terms of how it is connected to G2G. But G2G really is a complex system because there are so few controls that are being implemented. So understanding how to drive and nurture a complex system is really important for a program like this, particularly in super large organizations. And then the third one that I would recommend is Brave New Work by Aaron Dignan. And again, that's the podcast that I did earlier in the year as well. And Brave New Work really talks about self-management, because with this many people, right, you are essentially trusting them to manage themselves. You're not going to be constantly telling them what to do. And it also talks about kind of unauthorized change and some of the other ways that people work together in complex and autonomous systems in order to get things done.
Okay, and I'm just typing them into the chat box for everyone real quick. Thinking in Systems, Donna Lemon.
Yes, and then Brave New Work by Aaron Dignan.
And the other resources that you mentioned that you wrote, is there a website or something that I can?
Yeah, it's so it's Google's Rework site. You would think that I would know that off the top of my head, but I will grab it here for you.
And I can send this, so I'm gonna send the replay to everyone, and I can send links to those 3 books and to your Rework site if you want. So that way
it is Rework, REWORK .withgoogle.com.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we still have quite a few questions. They're just coming in like crazy here. What types of tools, resources, and skill development is provided for those that are teaching?
Yes. So we have a series of skill development workshops that are both available in person normally. Obviously, 2020 was a little different, and also virtually. And we have things like introduction, to facilitation skills. We have advanced facilitation skills. We have inclusive facilitation. So making sure that we are being conscious of how to create an inclusive environment when we are having folks who don't train every day, going out and training on some really like hairy, sticky topics. We also have quite a few courses on like co-facilitation. Sometimes when you are facilitating like a multi-day workshop. So we have some workshops that run all the way up to 5 days that we have G2Gers teaching. Making sure that you're in really good sync with your co-facilitator, and maybe you haven't taught together before, and here we go, like we're just going to jump right in. How do you adapt to a new co-facilitator, and then how do you make sure that you're not leaning on a facilitator that you have taught with too many times, right? We've done this together 17 times now, Vanya. Like, how do I not rely on you too heavily to make sure that we are sharing the we're reading each other's kind of cues, all that good stuff. So we have a variety of topics, and again, they are virtual workshops that are offered throughout the year. They are live workshops. We also do summits for our kind of top contributors every couple of years, where it's a very intense multi-day skill development programming. And then we have asynchronous, kind of e-learning resources that are built out as well.
Okay. So another question here: do your G2Gers have complete flexibility on topics that they want to teach? So for example, if I wanted to teach a class on scrapbooking, could I do that, or do I have to select from like a predetermined list of topics?
Absolutely not. You can certainly do that. I would take that. So yeah, no, everything is fair game. Like I said, medieval jousting, that was not something that we put on a list. Fire breathing was the best one though, I gotta say. Like the medieval jousting thing was cool because we had to buy the equipment and that was really fun, like to shop for with the facilitators. They did that in our Dublin office. But the fire breathing one, like in terms of actually like talking to the city of Mountain View and like making sure that we had the fire code stuff figured out and what liability looked like that was one where I was so proud that Google wasn't just like, that's nuts, you can't do that. Instead, the legal team was like, that's cool, we should figure out how we do that. So but I will stress that the cool thing, right? Because for a long time, people would say, "Hey, just tell them what to teach." Well, it's the same thing as saying, "Well, just tell people who's going to teach." Right? They have to have passion around it. They're not just going to volunteer for something and then teach something that they hate. That's not going to give you the same level of quality, right? Like they're going to be better at something if they love it. So the thing that we've noticed though is that only about, I want to say, it's only like 6%. It's under 10, and I think it's about 6 these days. Around 6% of the courses that we offer are non-business related. So it's fun to talk about the fire breathing and the 3D printing and the scrapbooking, but it makes up an incredibly small amount of what we actually do. And because we have such a wide range of topics that we already have content for within L&D, and we invite feedback, we invite contribution to evolving that content from our G2Gers so that they feel some ownership. When we make some recommendations, when we say, hey, it looks like, Toronto, according to your G2G office leads and your HRBP and your, the site lead, it looks like Toronto is really in need of some negotiation skills. Here's some content. If anybody's interested in teaching this, this is a priority for us for the first half of next year. So we really could use some volunteers on negotiation. We have never run short on volunteers. When you basically say, hey, this is what we're seeing, and people in your location are telling us that this is what they're seeing, and we need your help. Could you please help? Like we've never run short.
Awesome. That's so neat that that you can take fire breathing courses and things too. How do your most senior leaders take part, show their support of, and act as champions for G2G?
Great question. It really varies. So we have G2G facilitators all the way up to the VP level. So we have several directors and VPs who actually participate in G2G. Some of them teach lower leveled courses because they love getting in front of just like sort of the everyday Googler. And others teach courses within our Google School for Leaders, which is our director and VP leadership development sort of institution. We also have lots of kind of senior leveled folks who will send a note to their team, send a note to their office, just kind of thanking people for their participation. We have an office lead who sends out a note every 6 months to talk about, like, he has a whole list of people, like, here are all the people who participated in G2G. Thank you so much. This is why learning matters. This is why growth, personal and professional, is important. We couldn't do this without you. Like, we're going to be having, cupcakes with the G2G logo on them at this week's TGIF. Please come and thank our local G2Gers with me. So it just kind of depends. We leave it very much up to the individual leaders. We do have a little leadership hub where we give suggestions and recommendations about how leaders can support and show their love for G2G and for G2Gers, with a couple of suggestions and guidelines and stuff like that. But just like our G2Gers, they can customize to do it in a way that feels authentic and that feels like the right thing for them.
Speaking of leaders, we've got another question. Do you use the G2G model for leader development too?
We do. It is not something that we use as much. So with our leadership development courses, we do have more external vendors and more full-time leadership facilitators due to kind of the more, I would say, like, really complex, again, nature of the content. However, we do have directors and VPs who volunteer their time to teach and on some of the topics.
Great. And then two questions here from Christine. One is, does involvement in the program support consideration for promotion at year-end reviews for employees?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, right? Like we do provide, it depends on what's valued like within that, particular organization. I would say yes, like most, most managers, as I said, most leaders really value it. And others are like, that's lovely. Like it's not going to get you promoted, but that's lovely. So it just really depends on what org you're in. It also, is something though that we are continually working to try to establish as like community involvement, whether it's G2G, whether it is participating in one of our employee resource groups. So these are groups for folks who are less represented. So we have an employee resource group, an ERG for Black Googlers. We have a ERG for Native Americans. We have an ERG for Asian Americans. Like there's all kinds of different groups. Women, our Women at Google program is incredibly powerful and very popular. So it could be you're participating in ERG, maybe you're teaching as a part of G2G, or maybe you are volunteering as an interviewer and you're helping to source great talent for the future of Google. So we continue to try to help managers, leaders understand and help employees to be able to talk about the value that they bring through these community efforts so that consideration for those activities when it comes time for performance ratings and promotion is as consistent as we can get it across 110,000 person company.
Great. I have a question here about the infrastructure to measure the quality. How do you do that? How do you measure the quality, of the courses and things?
Yeah, so we have our kind of standard surveys that we look at, and the automation piece that we did was really to aggregate, and analyze both the quantitative and also the qualitative feedback within those survey results over time, and then create a dashboard for G2Gers so that they have a continuously updating, it actually updates every 24 hours, dashboard that shows them here's your quantity, here's how much you're doing, and here's your quality. And we have triggers built into the system so that let's say that we have a G2Ger who's been doing awesome and then they take on a new course and they're not so hot at teaching this new course right out of the gate. And so we have folks, we have an algorithm in the background that looks at it and says, you know what? Compared to the 3 years that they've been teaching all these other courses, their quality is pretty low. We're going to keep an eye on that. And then it might flag it to the G2G team, after two, lower quality scores or three lower quality scores. And then we'll have like a little, email that goes out to the individual saying, hey, you know what? Looks like this is kind of hard for you. Have you looked at these resources? We find that this particular course, you're teaching with a co-facilitator. You've never done that before. Like maybe that's part of it. Like here's some resources on co-facilitation, or all of your courses have been live to date and this one is virtual. So here are some, development resources on how to facilitate virtually. And then if it gets really bad, there will be a conversation with a G2G team member. And sometimes we will ask people to stop teaching like a particular course. We've actually fully exited people from the program before. We never tell anybody no when they volunteer, but we do exit people if they are showing that they are not meeting the quality bar. And again, 95% favorable, our quality bar is extremely high.
So are those all automated, like based on the survey? So if they get low on one score, then there's automated resources that are provided for each of those things. That's really neat. Wow. Okay, with COVID, this is from Jessica. With COVID, I would assume that more of your courses are being delivered virtually now. How was the transition supported for your G2Gers?
Yeah, so honestly, virtual has been a cornerstone of G2G kind of since the very beginning. Because if you remember when I was talking through that globe slide about how G2G kind of spread across our Google offices globally, the larger offices were the ones that were slower to catch on, and the smaller offices at the time were so small that you're not just going to deliver to your office. You're probably going to be, if you're sitting in Ann Arbor, you're probably going to be delivering to folks who are sitting in Toronto and Chicago and maybe Pittsburgh, in addition to Ann Arbor. So virtual and being able to facilitate virtually was something that we had development resources for and was really a big part of being a G2G facilitator. It's been that for about 10 years. So making that pivot to virtual for everything during COVID, it really just didn't take very long. There were some courses that, we had some logistics we had to take care of in order to like flip things, because you're not going to teach over, over Hangouts or virtually for 8 hours in a day or for 7 hours in a day. You're probably going to break it up, across a couple of days, like for 3 hours, 4 hours, here and there. You're definitely not going to teach a week-long course, 8 hours a day, 5 days in a row. So there were some logistical things we had to shift around. There were some courses that really just, don't lend themselves virtually at all, that would need to be completely redesigned, that got canceled. So that's why instead of 68,000 hours in 2019, we're looking at about 53 as of today, in 2020. But when you think about the enormity of the shift that was COVID for all of us, going from 68 to 53, like I'm still pretty stoked that we were able to get that much training out the door.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, Someone's asking, do you think this model can be exported to public education systems like universities? What benefits
Mm.
from your point of view?
Oh, I would love that. Yes. I really do. Um, and I think, my grand hope for the pandemic is that it will help us to rethink institutions that have had long histories in our society and in our culture. But that participatory sort of nature of G2G is critical for it to work. So if it's just going to be the professors defining all the curriculum and then handing it down to their TAs, which is at least what happened when I was in school a very long time ago, that's not going to work. Like there has to be a participatory culture to it. But yes, I think it could work if, again, people have that right mindset.
Yeah, I think that would be really neat to see in the future. Have you ever considered using strong G2Gers to meet with other companies and help them think more about setting up something similar in their company? Those
Mm.
can teach that transformation.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, we haven't. So much of what our G2Gers do are, we try to make it as little as possible about us and as little as possible about behind the scenes, right? We don't want them to think about how the program works. We just want them to think about being really great at facilitating and being, really wonderful to their participants, and to themselves, taking care of themselves in terms of working on things that bring them joy and energy and help with their well-being. So I'm not sure. I'm sure there are many G2Gers who could, sort of explain and consult on the program, kind of start to finish, who have done it for a long time. But I actually hope there aren't, because to me, that's a signal that we as a G2G team are not really doing our jobs. Because the idea is that the nuts and bolts really shouldn't be something you're thinking about. We take care of that. You take care of center stage, and we'll make sure that all the lights come on at the right times. Um, in terms of like consulting with, other companies about G2G, I'm sure, G2G team would be happy to have conversations. I am always happy to chat. So please feel free to add me on LinkedIn and just send me a message that, we chatted during this. And I'm always happy to like hop on a phone call and tell you a little bit more about the program, and hear a little bit more about how you're thinking about implementing it in your own context, and give some advice where I can be useful. So please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to chat further.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so another question. We still have probably about five more before we wrap up. Hopefully everyone's okay on time. Can you explain a bit more about how the G2Gers work as champions for knowing what learning to provide their sites?
Yes. So our office leads, and these are folks who apply to be office leads and that are selected. So there is an application process for the office leads as opposed to everybody can be an office lead. No, everybody can be a G2G'er, and our office leads need to apply. And these folks we help to establish partnerships. So we help them to create a partnership with their local HRBPs, maybe with local management. Some offices have like a managers at, group where even though they're spread out across lots of different teams and they don't necessarily work together, if they're all located in Boulder, for instance, there's a people managers at Boulder, community that comes together, right? So the champion or the office lead will really work with those individual kind of leadership groups in the office to get their take on what's going on and where they think they need to focus skill development for the upcoming 6 months. We do 6-month increments. There is a timeline where we reach out and we said, hey, office leads, it's time. It's time to go talk to your site lead and your HRBPs and your managers and figure out what's next. What's next for learning in Toronto? What's next for learning in Belgium? So we have that piece. And then in other offices, some office leads are actually very supportive of doing surveys. And so they will send kind of a learning needs survey out to the entire office. Normally it's in smaller offices, but sometimes I've seen it done in offices up to 2,000 people, and it works really well. And so they send a survey out about learning needs, normally kind of in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 minutes. And then they analyze that in conjunction with the information that they get from those leadership groups to figure out, okay, what are the top 3 or what are the top 5, priorities for the next 6 months, and how do we want to go about staffing them?
Awesome. What virtual medium do you use to provide training? Are you using like Google Hangouts or?
Indeed.
Zoom?
So Google has a very strong culture of use of what we call eating our own dog food. So we are very, very firm and committed to making sure that we are using our own tools. So yes, all of our internal trainings that are done virtually are done using Hangouts.
Awesome.
And soon Google Meet.
And Google Meet.
Yes.
Has G2G completely replaced any formerly L&D function, like new hire onboarding, for example?
Yes. So a lot of our kind of what I would say like universal skills, so skills that are not job related, we have gone completely to G2G. So presentation skills, negotiation, mindfulness. We've gone entirely to G2G. Our Search Inside Yourself program, which we have, obviously there's a Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute externally that was founded by the same person who founded it internally at Google. Our Search Inside Yourself group has over 140 G2Gers who teach mindfulness through that program globally. We have hundreds and hundreds, I think it's over 600 people now teaching our innovation process, and that's entirely G2Ger led. So yeah, we have more training happens at Google through G2Gers than through anything else.
Great. Last 2 questions. Were you also having one-on-one mentoring sessions, or are these?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about facilitation, right? But a huge component of G2G, thousands of people actually are participating in something that we call the Guru program. And our Guru program started out with career gurus about 11 years ago, 12 years ago. Becky Cotton and actually Jenny Blake, both ex-Googlers now, but still very good Google friends, who created this internally. And then we started scaling it up to include things like leadership coaching. We even have new parents coaching. So you're coming back from maternity leave or paternity leave. And you want to connect with other Googlers who are parents and figure out how the hell do I do this? We have parent mentors, parent gurus. We have manager gurus, innovation gurus, Noogler gurus, all kinds of folks. So yeah, it's thousands of people that participate as one-on-one coaches, and that is also an arm of the G2G program.
Wow, that's amazing. So the last question is kind of a combination of two here. How do you fund the logistics needed for the courses, materials? And do you actually provide and pay for all of the materials for the G2Gers, or do they, sometimes use their own? How does that work?
Yeah, we don't. So there are no materials that you can't print on an office printer. So yeah, we actually everything is self-service. Everything is has been reformatted to be in very easy printable formats. With self-service instructions about okay, you've got these worksheets like that correspond color coded to these sections within your facilitator guide, and you've got this booklet, and please ask everyone to bring a notebook, and like all of that, right? So we put as much on the individual learner as possible. So if we are doing virtual stuff, right, it's up to them if they want to print something out themselves, or if they want to, just have a virtual copy, or if they're coming to a course live, they will often be asked, to make sure that they have a notebook and a pen and whatever else they need that isn't customized. Some G2Gers I know have even told, like, sent the packets to the participants in order to take more of the burden off of the facilitator, and said, hey, bring a notebook, bring a pen, and make sure to print, this 14-page packet. You're going to need it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one last question because it just came in. I think it's a good final question. What are your future objectives for this program?
Oh, good one. Good one. I think, and as I said, I ran the program from 2011 to 2017. So I have not been a part of the core, G2G team in a few years now, about 3 years. But obviously I follow it really closely. I think that what I personally, so I don't know if these are their objectives, what I personally would love to see the program do is continue to expand the number of folks who are participating in leadership, manager, and kind of those higher level, topics, as well as courses that are targeted to our most senior Googlers. I'd love to see more of that. I'd also really love to see the one-to-one coaching just continue. That is and expand. So we have a couple thousand, Googlers who participate in one-to-one coaching. I would love to see, sort of every G2G'er, also be volunteering their time for one-on-one coaching. I think particularly as the pandemic has shown us, in times when you feel more isolated, yes, a virtual training can be helpful to connect with a group, but being able to just sit down with somebody and look at them and say, like, you know what, I'm really having a hard time right now, and I'm not quite sure what to do about it. And be able to have a really, empathetic and personal conversation with someone in a setting where you feel, you know, like safe, and that you have good confidentiality about what you're sharing. I would love to see more of that. I think that that's going to be even more important as we continue to adapt to this new way of working.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for volunteering your time today to share all of this. This has been so enlightening. I'm sure everybody loved it. And I will send out an email to all of the attendees and make sure that you have links to that rework site and you have links to the books that Sarah recommended as well.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Everybody, thank you so much. Again, as I said, please feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Fania.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.